Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, dude.
How was the crossing?
Super simple and easy. It's easy to get in. It's hard to get out.
You've lived a life of travel, and Mexico is no stranger to you. For people that might not know about you, we've been talking online randomly for
Years
now.
Years
right?
and years.
We kind of been in the industry, and we've been through a lot of changes as far as this. When I say this industry, of the tactical firearms veteran, social media, and like this world that where you kind of inhabit.
Yeah.
How did you get into this realm of?
It wasn't until not too long ago because I got out of the military in 2013.
What did you what did you do in the military?
Yeah, so I went in '05. Went to snipers and recon, and probably did 47 months collectively overseas in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I was in Ramadi in the early days in '06, getting our shit pushed in, working with NSW and the SEAL teams over there. The movie Warfare, actually, I was on that operation. Like, that was kind of jointly operated by us and NSW. And then I got out in 2013 and quickly found...
How many years did you put
So I
in?
did 8 years total. Yeah. And then 4 of those were deployed.
2005. That
was a heyday. And the thing is, so
full swing.
I had a golf scholarship at Arizona State when I was living in Tucson, and got it pissed away because I got caught smoking a cigarette during state finals for golf, and it was a 0% tolerance policy for tobacco.
Fuck.
So scores withdrawn, kicked off the golf team, lost my scholarship, and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do now? And I was like, well, actually, I'll just join the Army. I'll do 3 years as a photographer and get my GI Bill and then come back.
That was your plan?
That was my plan.
I was going to do photography?
Yeah, I was going to do photojournalism or combat camera or whatever in the Army. But in 2005, they're like, fuck no, dude. So I did a choice between cook or infantry, and obviously went infantry. And then it actually turned, I was pretty good downrange. And then I just kind of, made it my career for a long time. Got out and then went directly working for celebrities up in LA, a lot of which we all know, but I'm still on a 50-year NDA for that. So babysitted a bunch of billionaires and billionaires and celebrities.
Security. You went into security.
Yeah, executive protection, which I love the job, but I hated the company that I worked for. Like, just advancing locations and kind of being on your A game like that. Like, it was a really good transition from snooping and pooping and being in recon, and then moving over to executive protection.
That's an interesting, when people get out of an active, high stress environment like you were in, because I mean that one of the most stressful ones in recent history. And you're active, you're on survival mode, you're running around, you're doing shit, you matter, you have equipment with you have people with you, you're not alone, you're fucking part of this big thing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people get taken out of that shit. I imagine if you were not to have that work.
Well, and I found that out the hard way, because after I was doing executive protection, I went to go work for Blackwater, and I was over in Baghdad, and working with CIA, State Department, the DoD. There's no QRF. No one gives a fuck about you. Like, good luck if your radios work. No up armored vehicles. Well, we did have some up armored vehicles, but depending on what profile or mission set you're running, whether you're doing low profile, for the agency and kind of dressed as a in a hijab and all that stuff, all the way up until, wearing a suit, driving around with the ambassador, meeting with, foreign diplomats. But it was the only transition. I mean, you'll see a lot of guys coming out of the military that go right into contracting because our skills aren't very transferable to the civilian workforce.
Yeah.
No one's trying to hire a sniper in San Diego, and I found that out fucking the hard way. And
so you, like, when you say when you hear Blackwater now, and it brings a shit ton of baggage with it.
It does, and that was during the Obama administration and early GWAT days, and back when Eric Prince was owning it. But then there was the Turkirk, I believe it was Turkirk. Either way, yeah, there's still a lot of guys in jail from the Blackwater days, and it definitely wasn't like that when I was there.
Your experience with it, and again, like, for people that are out there that have these connotations of this negative experiences that we've learned about online. This like Wild West type scenario
Yeah.
that was out
And
there.
it was. I mean, it was in 05, 06, 07. But when I went in, I was in 2014 through 2017. And everything had really been buttoned up. I mean, almost to a detriment. You know, our hands were literally handcuffed behind our backs, you know, trying to operate in this environment that didn't give a fuck. There was a lot of guys we had that, you know, literally got balled up by the Iraqi army and like put in a trunk, and we had to like drive around to try to find and like get our guy back. But no one else was really trying to do it other than just our team.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean by, you know, throwing you to the wind. Like the CIA has no problem putting you, you know, a star on the wall under your name. But as far as all the other assets and stuff, it's not the Jason Bourne shit that people think it is.
The ending of that conflict, and which didn't really end, you know, it kind of like
Right.
basically kind of changed. Like, what was your experience with, like, I don't know, like I remember seeing the, you know, the Bush victory landing on the aircraft carrier event
Yeah.
on TV, and realizing that wasn't really the end, no, and then seeing the, you know, that flight 0911 flying out of Afghanistan with all these people trying to climb up on it.
Yeah, I feel bad for my guys that were on contract in Afghanistan, right? Because, you know, there was pretty much only two places that, you know, Blackwater or Triple Canopy was operating. That was pretty much in Baghdad and over in Kabul. And some of my boys got stuck in Kabul, and they were on contract for like 2 years in country because of, you know, the withdrawal, the exits and all that stuff. And then having to, you know, exfil, you know, Afghans and foreign diplomats and things like that. And they did a good job relatively at it with higher echelons of the government. But if you were kind of, I don't know, least important.
Yeah, there was
yeah.
there was a lot of prioritization happening
exactly.
there, which is sucks.
In Baghdad, nothing's really changed there. I mean, the embassy is still massive. There's still contractors on it. There's still a requirement. One of the good things too is because, you know, the snipers are relatively few and far between as far as, you know, the percentage of veterans getting out. I was making as much as a detail leader, you know, on the detail, because for every day that they didn't have a sniper on contract that they promised, it was like $5,000 to the Department of State and the CIA because they didn't have it. So they would try to keep us there as long as possible. So we were used and abused, you know, working on the low pro teams all the way up to the high echelon, like diplomat teams, and then all the way to, you know, kind of GRS aspects and safe house stuff. Just kind of got farmed out.
It's an essential thing.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
an essential
it was
skin
essential.
and essential. And also when you say like there's not a lot of you. Like,
No.
There's not a lot of people who go through that training who are specialized and then go into this realm.
Yeah, and then I had to go through the Blackwater compound sniper school that was kind of ran by the State Department and CIA, and it was a lot less field craft, but a lot more precision shooting. And the shooting package actually, I think, was probably better than the U.S. Army sniper school.
What's the difference between the sniper school that you went through, and you say more precision?
Yeah, more accuracy based, right? And so like there's a formula out there to where you can cut a 1 inch by 1 inch square in a piece of cardboard, and you can be 50, 60, 70 feet back from it. And if you do this formula, you can look through with your optic that 1 inch hole at the target, and then you can fire your round, and it meets right where your optic and your bullet path are. So that bullet will go through that 1 inch square and then hit a target that's 500 meters out. Now, imagine the levels of capabilities that you can do, you know, with that kind of formula in the wrong hands.
Yeah, it is scary.
Like, you're not fucking catching us.
No.
You're not. I mean, I'm 20 feet back in a room. I already have an exfil plan. It's definitely not going to be like this Charlie Cook shooting where, you know, the supposed kids jumping off a roof running away.
We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, like that's a scary ass fucking.
Yeah, I mean, that formula is still relatively classified. I mean, some people know it, but it's not easy to find.
Yeah, I've trained with and talked to a few people who are of that realm, and you know, some of the shit that I was learning from them, none of that, but just the kind of the ways that they're trained to set up hides for themselves, how they
Yeah.
conceal themselves inside of vehicles, or how they can take a shot from something that's moving and stops for a moment and then moves away.
Like
Which is
the DC sniper is kind of the prime example.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that
Yeah.
was pretty sage tactics, I guess, if you think about it.
yeah,
And that pretty much completely shut down the entire Northeast coast for, weeks at a time.
yeah,
So, and that was a guy that didn't really know what he was doing.
yeah.
So now if you, put that in the hands of somebody that's
can
gone
do-
through the State Department school or, the Army school or SODIC, Sephardic, I mean, there's no telling.
Working in that private realm, and also that las tres letras, the 3-letter realm. You say you've it's you don't have a giant plane flying over your head that you can call up to like have you don't have the resources that you would have
Right.
if you were.
Yeah.
And is there any I don't know, like we when people watch movies, and you mentioned Jason Bourne and all these things, we have these notions of what that life's like.
Yeah.
um we hear about people getting into substance abuse. We hear about people fucking going nuts, and when they come back and doing horrible shit here. And like, I mean, you seem like a pretty chill guy. Right? What experience do you have with that, with the other people that you were working with in that realm?
Quite a bit, man, because it's relatively toxic. It's all about who has the nicest Rolex, whose suit's the nicest, and these guys are making $250,000 a year, but they're buying all kinds of dumb shit back home. But what a lot of guys are doing, like they'll have like 3 brand new trucks, a brand new boat, and a jet ski, and like with no miles on it, and they're just buying shit to buy shit. But then you have the other end of the spectrum of guys that are going to Vietnam or Thailand on their off time or their break, and now it's just a bunch of hookers and blow, and they kind of rinse and repeat. It's like fishermen, right? Like fishermen, they go out, they catch a bunch of fish, make a bunch of money, and then they come back, smoke a bunch of crack, spend it at the strip clubs, and then they're broke, and then they have to go back out fishing again. And it was kind of the same thing on contract. I mean, obviously there was a bunch of guys that were just all tweaked out, but there is also a byproduct of doing that life, and then a life in the military, which we call operator syndrome. And you're just so used to working at such a high level and having all this dopamine and endorphin dumps that is next to impossible to find in the civilian spectrum again.
That aspect of it, I think, I don't know, like I've never been in that realm. I've experienced that realm in certain ways, and I've worked with people who are, but the whole aspect, one, what type of individual is capable of going through this torturous process, and also this process where you are both pressured physically and mentally, and also you have to perform at a high level mentally.
Yeah.
Like, what type of dude is that? It's probably somebody with like a high functioning ADHD component to him, maybe.
Yeah, maybe borderline sociopath. I mean, to be honest, and that's
in that aspect, like the borderline sociopathic thing, which again, I think in media and the way like you watch Jarhead and all these movies that are portraying these individuals, and the way that training basically is about augmenting the dehumanizing aspect of a warrior.
Yeah.
When I say dehumanizing aspect, like, how can you get somebody from middle of nowhere America who worked at a Dairy Queen as he was trying to fucking struggle his way through high school to then show up somewhere and do something that he's never even done or experienced before, like making somebody's head just come completely off their body?
Yeah, I mean, we transitioned, and actually there's 2 really, really good books. One called On Killing and On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. And I read those 2 books, and they literally changed my life, because it delves down deep into the social science of what it's like to dehumanize people, to lose all of your empathy and sympathy for humanity as a whole. And then it just becomes all about the people that you surround yourself by, the certain levels of peer pressure in order to perform at high levels. And then also, all the years and tens of thousands of hours of training that goes into killing somebody. And if you've never really afforded that opportunity, you just kind of feel like, you're your wasted energy and money.
Yeah.
And so when you do have that opportunity and you get a taste of it, you feel validated and justified, and then then you start chasing, more and more.
Don't get me wrong. Like when we talk about this, and I'm not, it is essential though.
It is essential. I mean, bad people need to die.
It is essential for a country to have people of that nature. Like it's a George Orwell quote about like violent men. That's why we sleep peacefully in our beds. Because they're out there. There is a cost to that, though.
There is a cost.
And I guess, if somebody could tell you the cost of this before you started, when you were trying to figure out your photography career,
yeah,
would you take that bet?
Yeah, I think I still would have done it, right? In the event that guy didn't throw me under the bus for smoking a cigarette, like what would I have done? Would I have made it to the PGA Tour? Would have I just caught an STD at Arizona State and dropped out from partying too hard? I don't know. I think a lot of other people paid, a much higher price.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't take any of it back. However, if I would have known the cost and difficulty of reassimilating back into a civilian life, that was exponentially harder than, pretty much anything else I've ever done in my life. Because you go from hero to zero, like you were the shit, you were an E7, you were all tabbed out, you had all these cool schools, you had all these deployments, and then you come back and no one gives a fuck.
Can't see that on you.
Yeah,
like
it's irrelevant.
Yeah. Another question that I have, and it's something I ask people that've gone through some of these things. I had my friend Eddie Gallagher sitting where you were, and I kind of asked him kind of the same thing. Seeing these wars that we've just gone through, like I remember talking to kids, that were going in who weren't even born on 9/11. Seeing this and then seeing, this horrible exit from Afghanistan, like what does that feel like? This is, I mean, the worth it aspect of it, I guess.
It was just pure rage. I mean, the veteran suicide rate after Afghanistan went up 56%.
I've seen there's a digital graph, and it just
it skyrockets because now everything that we did was fucking for nothing. Now we're paying the Taliban money when previously they were the enemy. Now we're leaving behind billions of dollars worth of assets. Now we're leaving behind people, and then jeopardized and ended up sacrificing the lives of 13 Marines that were out there trying to do their part because of political fucking bullshit and not being allowed to shoot that guy with the IED at the Abbey Gate. And it's just enraging, and it feels like we're disenfranchised as veterans because now we get out already, no one to give a fuck, and having to reassimilate and try to find a new career and a new life. But now the government's also telling you that everything you did was fucking for nothing, and there's nothing to fall back on and nothing to lean on. Like there's almost just no pride in it anymore.
And the I remember post 9/11 flags everywhere, fucking firefighters are rock stars, cops or the military. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is
now an American flag is tied to racism. If you fly that.
So, like, I know another kind of question, and I also ask again. In all these questions, I ask because I'm new to this American experience in a lot of ways, man. I'm a few years in, it's been the wildest time, I guess, to become an American.
Seriously.
Right? The way that people treat, or the assumption that people have of a service member. Do you find that sometimes with people where like, hey, you're trying to get to know somebody maybe, or you're in this new relationship with somebody, or you're meeting people and they hear about your background, and all of a sudden these
walls get put up,
or these assumptions about you.
Yeah, that's happened. I mean, I feel like I kind of constantly fight that every day. Maybe not so much anymore, but when I first got out early on, I didn't tell anybody in San Diego that I was in the military or a sniper, and for that very reason, because I was trying to reassimilate. I was trying to get a job, and I've even, gotten drunk at house parties with some HR managers, and I was like, all right, I got a question for you. You got 2 fucking resumes. One's dialed and the other's okay, but one guy was in the military and special operations and the other guy wasn't. Which one are you going to pick? And every single one of them bites their lip and they're like, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to pick the vet. And I was like, why? And they're like, because we have preconceived notions that you're going to be hard to deal with, and you're going to be aggressive.
The discrimination aspect of your service, dude,
Yeah.
which is something that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, that specific aspect of this, how there is just a cultural media programming that we've received after this conflict, which isn't realistically hasn't, people are still running around in Africa and other parts of the world. But it's an immediate, like, we don't want this dude in our company to have a freak out, or if the insurance companies will have certain math related to people that have been former members of the service in a lot of ways, and how they are, according to numbers, they're more prone to whatever.
Right. And then the opposite end of that is, you get somebody that shows up on time. You get somebody that's willing to leave last. You get somebody that will see a job all the way to fruition, and, things are getting done. You will see somebody that's well organized in a high pressure situation. But those aren't the traits. They rather take some vanilla fuck from Berkeley, with his bachelor's degree in basket weaving over, anybody with a work ethic and a GI Bill.
When you were trying to re-assimilate, like, what were you aiming at as far as a profession? You're trying to get away from this shit. Like,
I didn't know right away. When I was at Blackwater, that's when I was really kind of started getting tied in with the industry. That's when I met Eddie. I was working with the guys over at Triple Out Design, which is now Prometheus Design Works, PDW. And so I thought that I wanted something in that space, obviously, because I could speak to it. I guess in a grand scheme, it would have been doing like R&D for Loophole or, Night Force Optics, or, something of that nature. But then I quickly found myself picking up design. I was designing clothes and apparel, and kind of wanting to hand that off over to Pat Ma.
Where that came from? Like, how do you go from, running around there being a highly skilled shooter to like now making clothes?
Well, it's actually
that's a wild fucking.
It's kind of along the same lines as, some of the things that you're doing. Is I noticed that when I was on contract, like, there was guys getting balled up, and so I was trying to figure out like how to hide lockpicks or handcuff keys in jeans or waistbands or belts.
But by the way, like, I used to use some of the OG TAD gear for work. That was, and I remember like seeing some of these outings, like, man, some fuckers been bumping into the same bullshit that we've been bumping into here. Like, as far as like, hey, it'd be a good idea to have some of this shit on you. Like, for me, it was like, hey, Mom, can you sew this elastic band on my fucking pants? Like, for what?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started. And then I, realized I didn't want to go in the world of, making denim. And it did kind of start because when you're in recon or in snipers, you have to like hand make your own ghillie suit.
Yeah.
And then also, before this massive tactical trend of all this Gucci gear, we kind of had to make our own Gucci gear, so we were cutting out knee pads and sewing them into our own pants before there was cry.
There wasn't any of that. This is Black Hawk era, I guess, right?
Just after. I mean, Black Hawk was 93, but like
True Spec, Black
it was
Hawk,
511, Black Hawk. LBT was just barely coming out, but like
that. But that was like there was nothing. Whenever I would see clothing like that, I was like, man, like, I wish it was reinforced here.
Right.
And
right.
I wish it had like an air hole so I can fucking just air out here. Or I wish it wasn't all fucking here because I'm wearing a plate carrier. So
And we were cutting T-shirts and then sewing like our multicam sleeves from our uniform onto our T-shirts, because wearing, the full-blown zip-up, multicam stuff or
fucking
ACU stuff.
Like
shit.
Shit.
It's just trash. So that's how it all kind of started. And then I got really lucky by becoming friends with AmericanSnipers.org. So it was a nonprofit that would source and supply gear to veterans downrange, or snipers only. And through them, that's how I got tied in with Chris Kyle and then Ed Eaton and then kind of all these guys. And then I was invited to, the Gucci parties, the handshake parties at SHOT Show. And then that kind of spun off from there, and then just kind of started doing social media management, running that for a bunch of different companies, trying to learn my way around. There's another guy that we mutually know. I don't know if you know him, but Jonathan Wegner. I know Eddie knows him pretty well, but he was the founder of Life-Proof Phone Cases. Then he was over at VP of Design over at SOG Knives, and kind of took those from gas station knives to actually something that you actually want to carry. And so he kind of mentored me and held my hand kind of in the industry and getting into marketing. And the more that I got into marketing, the more I just realized that like I love this.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, well, I got a camera, so I just kind of started all encompassing.
I mean, you're basically having access to training events, equipment, and stuff like that. You have a camera there, you're taking pictures, and you're putting them online.
Yeah,
and it's
and it worked, and I knew what I was looking for, and just kind of ran with it. But I was being brought into meetings that I really had no business being in with regards to package design or product development or R&D, and I was like, all right, this is what I want to stay in.
Yeah, the whole aspect that and I've stumbled in that to myself where I'm like, hey, I used to make these things for myself, and now people want them because I posted them online and weird pictures and cool pictures. And
yeah, it's just kind of having those capabilities, and whether that's being left on contract over at out in Baghdad and at Blackwater, or when I live down here, and in the event that I get balled up, am I going to be able to get out of zip cuffs or handcuffs for that matter? And just kind of having those capabilities. And that's something that, was relatively ingrained in me for, the better part of 10, 12 years. So, product development.
Social media, which I think both you and myself were, I mean, I started off on Tumblr.
Oh yeah. I started off on Facebook. Well, MySpace.
Yeah. I started off on Tumblr, and I had Eddie recently found like I lost all that shit. I think Eddie and our one of our guys found a whole like treasure trove, like some of the oldest posts that I made.
Yeah.
And I remember there was nobody. There's not a lot of people kind of posting about some of these things, specifically related to the tradecraft, clothing modification, just like hiding things. And I remember I started posting about the fact that I carry around like fruit knives and shit like that. And people are fascinated about the fact that, like, why aren't you carrying around this giant fucking tactical knife? It's just fucking little fruit knife.
Yeah.
It's capable, it's small, you can get it anywhere, leave it outside an airport in a planner. But I started finding this world that was not only wanting to see what people like myself were doing out there for their own preparation and training and trying to figure things out for themselves, but also wanted to emulate some of that for themselves.
Yeah.
So then I always joke about the fact that I probably sold millions of dollars of knives for Victorinox.
Mm-hmm.
Victorinox sold a shit ton of fruit knives because of me. I never got a cent from that. And then I'm like, God damn it, I need to do better with myself. But I just remember finding in social media this weird tool, this tool where I can blog about my experiences, showcase some of the things that I carried with me, how I carried them, and some of the modifications I would do to my equipment or my gear, and then just kind of talk about it openly in a way where I wish other people, when I was coming up, would talk to me about some of these things, because I didn't have access to any of that.
Right.
Like, what was your introduction to, what was your social media like at the beginning?
I just remember, it's kind of crazy, just fanboying over all these guys in the industry that I loved, right? And so, Pat Mon, the owner of Triple Out Design, and then Caleb Cry over at Cry Precision, and just wanting to know these guys, not only for selfish reasons of potential employment or mentorship, but also I just really valued and appreciated what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of learned that's the easiest access. What am I going to do? Go on their website and hit the info contact me form. The CEO is not answering that shit, but he is checking his DMs. And so by kind of building a portfolio, a living portfolio on Instagram of kind of things that I was doing, who I was. Actually, I almost got in a lot of trouble at Blackwater one time because I posted my loadout in my embassy room. And I ended up getting a phone call when I was still on contract from Brian Sane, who's the head WEG over at American Snipers. And he's like, hey, kid, one of our CIA people just called me and said, who the fuck is this? Because I had an American Snipers patch on my body armor. but apparently it was classified as far as like what we were carrying.
Yeah.
And so I had to rip that down. So, and then there was the repercussions of posting, the cool guy shit that I was up to.
Yeah.
And also, I still had to hold my top secret clearance. And so I was like, fuck this. I'm fucking tired of the government telling me what I can and can't do. And so then when I got out and I left contract, kind of went into business for myself, it was about the cool guy gear. Like I was still like really, really into guns, into ballistics, into optics. I was just a gear nerd.
You mentioned sliding into the DMs of some of the people you admired because they're not going to answer their email, but their DMs maybe. If you have a your resume is basically your social media, which is like a thing I also kind of encountered on myself when I wanted to meet somebody or talk to somebody and know something about something. Reach out to people, but I became big enough on social media where I could like, hey, I had like 10,000 followers, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I would send, and I was always surprised by how kind some of these people were and how they were like giving me their time.
Yeah.
I remember reaching out to Craig Douglas of Shivworks, and thinking he's never going to answer this fucking message in 1,000 years, and he just fucking chill motherfucker called me and like, hey, give me your phone number, I'll call you. And he just gave me this run through of like, hey, if I was you, I would do this, 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 and this, and this. Yeah.
And it opens up doors for you. I mean, mine is my living portfolio. And now it's all the cool shit that I shoot or photograph, because a byproduct of my job is I'm, hanging out of helicopters, taking photos or video, or I'm fast roping off a boat, or I'm spearfishing, or I'm scuba diving, flying around, and everyone's just like, what the fuck does this guy do? And I get it, and it is sick and sexy, but now kind of having that portfolio, and then also now you can kind of verify, validate, and vet individuals that you follow by whom also follows them.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot with me, because there's, some guys from DevGuru or some prominent figures in the industry, and then when somebody looks at my portfolio or my Instagram, they're like, oh, how does he know this guy?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I guess he's not a neckbeard fucking weirdo then.
That is another aspect of this industry that I've kind of slowly started to figure out. You can't post your resume online for everybody to see.
Yeah.
Right? But you will work with people in official capacities in different ways. And sometimes they online out. A lot of the people that I met and trained with when I was active later on became, after they left the military like you, they became these figures, you know?
Yeah.
Some of them became podcasters, some of them became knife designers or gear designers, or became instructors in their own rights. And on my end, that's the way I've been trying to figure out how to verify people on my end, or like how people verify me. Like, hey, like what's his background? Well, he did this and that, but like, and this is who's he's worked with. So that's how which is a weird.
It is weird too, and especially because in the grand scheme of things, I don't really have that great of a resume, or a background. And one of the things I fail to understand is, we look at this whole Tim Kennedy debacle, and you were a UFC fighter, you were a Green Beret, you were a sniper, you were a Ranger, but like the levels of transparency that you have now on social media, and then all these podcastings, like everything's on record now. Like I fail to understand why people are lying about their career or inflating it. And now we look at what that turned into.
The open conversations about homicide, murder. Well, I don't know if it's war, you know, but there's something. I mean, I've talked to people who've been in that chair, who've gone through this process of going into combat zones and doing things, and my experience, and people with all these experiences, and you never like the true dudes.
Yeah,
that's not something you kind of like boast about, I guess.
No,
no. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's a psychological thing, or I don't know.
But then you meet any single civilian and they find out my background, and the first question out of their mouths is, how many people did you kill?
Yes.
So it's like, what is it?
Yeah.
Which one is going to upset whom on what day?
Yeah. I mean, and that changes also now. Like we used to have these dudes that would come from Vietnam and just had stacked bodies. And now we have recently talked to a kid online who's out there in the Ukrainian conflict, who I know people in that realm. We actually had a viral post recently that we made these Sicario monkey patches with tactical outfitters. There was a monkey that a cartel had in Mexico, and it got shot. They eliminated the gang that had it as a pet, and he had a little armored vest and everything. And they fucking went over and shot this monkey after they shot all of his friends, which was cold. Whoever did that, shame on you. But there's a picture of this monkey.
I think I did see that.
So we made a patch out of it because Eddie and me are idiots. And they made it out to the Ukrainian conflict, and there's a bunch of the drone operators carrying around the Sicario monkey patches, and it made it on the news. It was like a whole thing in Mexico. They're like, what the fuck's going on? Why are they glorifying cartel violence? But through that, we met, we talked to 2 operators that are out there. These kids that are vaping in holes and running off.
Yep, with a 150-person body count.
I mean, we talked to one, and I thought he was exaggerating. He was like higher than that number.
It's a target-rich environment.
Higher than that number, and he said, sometimes it's hard because I don't know how many there were in the group.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're underground, and they get buried, so we don't know. And it was just like, that's next, probably.
Yeah, it is.
That's going to be the next group of...
Scary, especially with those drones, man. I mean, and we see the videos all over Instagram, and I'm like, holy shit. Just like driving it in the back of a 5-ton and like 10 dudes just get blown out the sides.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I see the augmentation of all these new optical systems and thermal night vision, and now all these AI algorithm capable things that can figure things out for themselves and give you direction, as an operator.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's not, I have 2 really good friends that are out there. They're kind of perpetual war junkies. They're of the same type that we were talking about earlier, kind of dealing with operator syndrome. Try to come back here, try to, make ends meet, whatever, and just it wasn't working out for them because they still just have this hyper aggressive, nature and personality that's not conducive to a corporate environment or the civilian world in general. And they're like, well, fuck it, let's go to Ukraine. And they've been over there for 3 years, and they're former special operations guys, and they're in conflict, and now they're training all these new guys like kind of coming through, and a byproduct of that is Ukraine gave them citizenship and a passport, and the first time I went to Ukraine is well before the war, and I was in Kiev. And
you went to Ukraine?
Yeah, I did once well before the war, working with a marketing firm out there, and then second was during the war.
What made you go out there?
A little bit of kind of chasing war. I always wanted to do like war documentary, and kind of photojournalism or videos and things like that. But it was under the notion that it was a nonprofit that I was working for.
I have many friends who were veterans at this time, and as soon as that conflict kicked up, a lot of them were like,
"Fuck yeah!"
They're like, "Hey, we're going out. You want to come with us?" I'm like, dude,
because the gloves are off. It's not the government no longer, keeping you accountable. Now it's Ukraine begging you to kill as many people as possible.
I think the narrative around that has changed multiple times. It used to be like Slava Ukraine and like put sunflowers in your pockets, Russian, because where you die, at least sunflowers would grow. I remember this lady just saying that. But then we heard that there's a lot of propaganda around some of the aspects of the war, who's running it, and then we kind of like missed the fact that there's a shit ton of corruption in that government, and there's a lot of weird shit going on as far as arms trading and a lot of weird stuff going on in that war.
Yeah, it's a military-industrial complex.
And then we have this Russian force coming in, and I remember when this war kicked off, and again, this is not my wheelhouse, but I'm a nerd for shit, and I study and I read and all this shit. And I remember just like, these fucking new generation tanks that the Russians are gonna just showcase in this battlefield. They're gonna wipe these fucking Ukrainians off the fucking playing field, or they They have air capabilities. These Ukrainians don't have shit.
Yeah.
Like, like they have some, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we saw these kids in the back of trucks, just covered in new gear. None of them fucking any experiences, and some of them reading the instruction manuals for these fucking surface-to-air missiles in the fucking field somewhere, fucking decimating these fucking Russian forces. The Russians going into the Ukraine and forgetting that you need fuel to run a war.
Right.
So you started seeing all these holes in the whole narrative that we grew up on as far as the Russians. Fuck, watch out with like. What was your observations out there as far as that?
It was kind of the same, right? Like I was relatively, unimpressed with Russia and their capabilities. And, the reason why they're taking so much ground is there's just overwhelming force. And, Ukraine having a much smaller population and Russia still being able to essentially strong arm people, into a draft.
From your perspective and your training and going up in this military, I mean, I've heard the concept of a near peer adversary.
Yeah.
And I imagine while you're getting your training, you're learning about foreign firearms and weaponry and tactics, and you're seeing conflicts where the Russians show up in Syria. I imagine there was some shit there as far as conflict between the United States and the Russians. Were you surprised about the fact that these motherfuckers forgot how to fight a war?
Yeah, hell yeah. And I'm like, we were worried about the Cold War and nukes, and we had every right to be. But now when it's ground combat and force on force, they have this massive convoy of vehicles just full of soldiers that is, one JDAM away from not having a fucking battalion anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a large lack of kind of hierarchy and structure that we have in the U.S. military that we're so good at.
Corruption also. Like, I was like, you will know more than this. Like, I would just go off bloggers, and I would go into the Russian bloggers and also the U.S. And there's a lot of propaganda on both sides. But you would see things like they were carrying around body armor that wasn't really body armor. Some of these guys that would be found in the fields with like fake body armor on, or subpar equipment, or some of these tanks were fucking just garbage fucking equipment tanks that the equipment wouldn't work on them. They're driving blind in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, and it shows now by having to ask, North Korea to come in and start providing bodies. But the thing is Americans as a whole spent the better part of 20 years in sustained and active combat fighting a guerrilla war. So now that it's near peer or kind of force on force with a uniformed military, we're like, oh, fuck, this is way easier than fighting a guerrilla war. And hence why all the guys started going over there, coming out of the GWAT generation and, providing all this instruction and things like that.
Because
and
they're coming with the experience of fighting urban warfare in a similar environment than this. They're already...
Yeah, and then when we were training up early, we were kind of training under that same pretense of, going to war with a Russia or a uniformed military. So now we have both. Now we have the guerrilla tactics, and then now we have the conventional tactics. And now when you combine those with a bunch of pissed off dudes that have, millions of dollars of training and 20 years of experience.
From your perspective and your experience, where did they get the idea to use these drones? The Ukrainians started utilizing these drones in a grand way. Where did that come from? Where does this augmentation? Because before that happened out there, like a drone dropped a grenade on the backyard of my former boss, right here in Baja, and I found a drone loaded with meth probably back in 2011 somewhere over here. So like my mind was already like,
yeah, what can we do with this?
Yeah, and then I saw an ISIS group utilizing badminton.
Oh yeah, the badminton things.
Yeah, with a 40 millimeter grenade on the bottom and dropping those on a war setting somewhere. I'm like, oh, these are interesting. But then the Ukrainians took that shit to a different level. Like, where did that come from?
So the first time that I went out there, Ukraine, a lot of people don't know, but they were really technologically advanced as far as what they were utilizing, their cameras, production equipment, because we were outsourcing a lot of video production to Ukraine. And a lot of these guys were in school for programming and coding and developing. And so now when you have idle hands and or the Russians that are, infringing on their country, Now they're just going to try to figure out how to do it better and how to make it lethal, you know. And they were hand making all their own drones. They even had like drone flying school in college. And now they're like, well, what if we just put a fucking mortar on this thing? This is going to be dope. And
That was a perfect storm. I remember at the beginning of this war, we're like a month in, like people turning winery. You saw old women making these Molotov cocktails and just switching labels and shit like that, and people trying to figure out anti-tank technology to put on the road so people wouldn't pass away. These kids who were involved in filming shit with drones and who were aware of all of this technology were just like, can we put an explosive on this?
yeah, and now you have the internet, right? Where unlike in Russia, you know, you're very compartmentalized from, you know, outside sources of news and information, just like China mitigates, and there's no Facebook in China. Poland, Ukraine, you know, kind of Eastern Bloc, Czech Republic was all over the internet. And so now you take a previous skill set, an idle drone in their closet, and Reddit, and now they can pretty much do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, I mean, the internet has become this, like, if anything is successful in war, it'll be viral.
Yeah.
And once it's viral, it's viable. And
Yeah.
now we need to figure out how to create this for our use. I think the first times I started seeing these drones being utilized, they were targeting armored vehicles. They were trying to drop grenades into hatches, which every single piece of dopamine in my brain for some reason just activated when I would see these kids just.
Just a nice little honey hole.
Dude, I can't imagine that. I asked one of these kids, like, what does it feel like when you? He said, it's good a few times at the beginning, but then it's just like swatting flies. He
Yeah.
said, God damn.
I want to know still why these, you know, Russian tanks, they'll drop a hand grenade in one of the hatches, and then it's like this just massive influx of like white phosphorus, and then like the top turret like goes blowing off. Like I know there's been some science behind it, but it's like the level of vulnerability that these Russian, you know, T-level tanks have up top. Like the whole thing just like blows itself up.
For me, like I think one of them mentioned the fact that a lot of these things have cooling units in them. Tanks will have like some sort of like air fucking filtration and cooling units inside of them.
Yeah.
None of them fucking worked. Obviously, they weren't fucking being maintained and shit like that. So some of them had to like to be able to breathe in them.
Yeah. You got all these fumes coming back in and stuff, so the tops are open.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing these giant cages on these tanks that try and mitigate this, and then they figured out signal disruption.
Yeah.
And now we have wired drones. So
yeah, now they're using the fiber optic wires.
They're all like they're covering. It's like forest covered in these things.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I mean, I did see that the other day on the video where all these trees just had all the fiber optic cables from all the drones flying around. And just, you know, obviously because they're fire and forget, and then just leave it around, and now it just looks like a spider just, you know, busted a nut everywhere. And it's like, dude,
Fuck.
You guys been going at it. The thing is, though, is like I just don't know. I think Russia's too proud to ever, like, you know, pull out of this conflict.
I think they can't.
I mean, it's too late.
When I say they, I think leadership can't fucking back off this anymore.
Yeah.
Or else they're going to be eaten by its own people. So they don't have a choice, I think.
Yeah.
When you were there, and I asked this because you know, there were a few videos probably 4 years ago, well, not 4, maybe 2 years ago of surface to air technology in cartel hands, like pretty sophisticated ones. And to this day, I don't know if they were real or not. I don't know if these man pads were. It's a video and a picture, so like you don't know. Maybe it's like a fucking airsoft thing. I don't know. But there was a lot of talk, and still is a lot of talk about trafficking of arms and just some shady shit happening in that conflict of people just like finding weapons caches and putting them in a car and like sending them somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that you kind of saw out there? Is that like
Hands
a real
down.
thing?
Yeah. I mean, there was certain groups of individuals that were picking up munitions and crates of ammo and hiding them in taxis or vehicles that read UN or press or whatever on it. and they were taking them all the way down like to the front lines in order to like help supply those guys, and it was coming in from the rest of Europe. So a lot of arms trafficking going in, mainly just to sustain the conflict for the Ukrainian side of it. However, also too, I think probably one of the craziest things that I didn't even really get to experience in GWAT was we were driving the van like into this town in Ukraine, and I hear these fighter jets overhead. And next thing I know, it's a Russian fighter jet, and Ukrainian fighter jet having a dogfight like fucking 500 feet above the deck. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. And then I made the mistake. I called my wife one time, like when we had just gotten to our hotel in Kiev, and the air raid sirens start going off. And I'm like looking around, I'm with a bunch of guys from, tier 1 levels. And I'm like, do we get under, or is this because, I'm used to that and a shitty mortar landing somewhere. But then all of a sudden, like 3 blocks over, this massive like surface air, well, it was like a air to surface missile, ended up hitting this train depot, where the train depot ended up getting blown up because they were transferring munitions all the way down the front lines. So they're taking out those like larger pieces of infrastructure for transportation, all that. But
who are you seeing coming into this conflict? I mean, they didn't have enough bodies. The Ukrainians didn't have enough bodies, and then you saw this call out. And I remember this because not only my veteran friends in the U.S., crazy fuckers, were all like started to gear up and fucking figure their way out there. But also some of my former people that I used to work with here in Mexico, like some of them started like, hey, we can figure out a way out there. It's like, fuck, man, what are you doing? So there's a lot of foreign fighters coming into this conflict. And when you have conditions like the ones they had, and you have desperation, and you just need bodies to fill in roles, there's not a lot of selection probably happening, and not a lot of background checks happening in some of these places, I imagine.
No, there's not. And unlike, in GWAT, the insider threat's not really an issue, I don't think, for Ukrainian forces, because it's all Americans, Brits, Australians, pretty much anyone that came out of GWAT. And
Colombians, a lot of Colombians.
Really?
A lot of Colombians.
And what side are they fighting for?
Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Is what I've... There's been recent news out there, like some of the cartel reporting talks about the cartels sending fighters to the front in the Ukrainian conflict, them taking notes on what's happening out there, and then coming back with that skill set.
I wouldn't doubt that at all.
I don't think they sent anybody, in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't think the cartels were like, hey, you, Antonio, Julio, go out to this Ukrainian conflict, we'll pay for your ticket. I don't think it was that way. I think it was probably Colombian fighters.
Yeah.
Most of the augmentations of training, like a lot of the IEDs we're finding in Mexico now, a lot of the improvised explosives, and a lot of the drone technology and stuff like that, you will usually hear conversations or talk about Colombian specialists coming in and teaching and advising.
Yeah.
And then that's what you see a lot out there, as far as a lot of Colombians out there fighting. So I think that's the link that I've seen as far as that conflict and the one in Mexico. But I don't know. I've heard different stories. I've heard some of the people that are in some of those international units being treated pretty horribly by the Ukrainians, or differently, I guess, because there is, and this is something I've heard from them, like there are neo-Nazi groups.
Oh yeah.
In these, and they have feelings and thoughts about people from not there,
Yeah, and they're not dumb to it, right? And kind of to your point, I do think that they're going out there in order to pick these TTPs, right? Because it is literally at the cutting edge of technology on the front lines.
It's showcasing technologies that then get like we recently talked to somebody that's in the arms industry, and he was talking about the fact that when the Ukrainians, that I don't remember the operation, but the Ukrainians basically parked a bunch of loaded trucks in Russia with these drone modules on the top of them, and that would open up and then start flying out, basically an internal attack of their infrastructure. And whatever that specific technology was, a bunch of companies were already working on that behind the scenes, but didn't want to showcase it. But now they showcase it, so now they're like, oh, I guess the next trade show we go to, we have to showcase this technology now. So that's how it's been kind of like progressing like really quickly, drone swarms and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean they have it. It's crazy. There's only so much I can talk about it, but I had to go to this kind of drone exhibit kind of expo called UTAC. That was out there in Georgia at an old like Northrop Grumman like missile manufacturing facility in like the middle of fucking Georgia, and every drone company from the United States was there, and then a bunch of people from the CIA, from Team 6 and Delta are going out there and showcasing all the different methods and ways to utilize this drone technology. And this is anywhere from the thing that they developed at DARPA called Spot, and it looks like the dog that kind of walks around like a robot. But now you can put a 240 machine gun on top of that thing. It also has gas canisters. It also has flashbangs. It has thermal technology. And they'll send that in now. And now Leica has this whole like 3D mapping thing using LiDAR tech. So now you can paint the entire picture of the inside of this building before anybody actually has to sacrifice themselves.
Yeah.
And then they'll send one drone in the top window in order to break the window. And then we'll send another drone to go in at the top. And that drone also has munitions on it and, fire capabilities. And now you're putting in AI face tracking technology. And now you don't have to aim the drone anymore.
Are you also seeing? And again, I advise and I talk to people about some of these things. And it's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse, I think, is fourth generation warfare in places like Latin America. That's my wheelhouse, and that's what I kind of pay attention to. But they ask me what trends I see here and in this type of conflict. I see the trend of trying to go homemade. Basically printing and cheap is the trend. Trying to figure out how to make it the cheapest you can, so you can send multiple drones to overwhelm or overload any sort of anti-drone technology that is out there. So, like, let's say you have a Vladimir Putin protection circle where they have these homing drones that they carry with them to try and, if they see a drone coming, they'll shoot their own drone at it.
Yeah.
And it'll hone in on it and explode it. How many of those can they have with them at one time? I don't know.
Right.
And so then the conversation, and this is something that's been happening here, because now you see federal forces in Mexico carrying some of those, or carrying their space drone guns, even cartel guys, which is like wild to see, like a kid with flip-flops and an AK-47 and a dude with a space gun in front of him, right? I think that the thing I'm seeing, as far as at least criminal or these non-state actors, is going cheaper and high numbers, high volume, to overwhelm or overload any sort of technology that is being trying to utilized against them, and wired drones. Like, that's where I see the trend going on the criminal kind of like non-state actor side.
On the criminal side, for sure. On the U.S. side, we just utilize it to fund, the industrial complex. And so nothing drone-wise that we're utilizing is cheap. I mean, the grand scheme of things, it's a lot cheaper than a JDAM, right?
Yeah.
Like, DJI is.
The U.S. probably has something similar to a Shahed drone, like the cheap, fucking mass-produced, like, hey, just send a bunch of these to somebody. Is that not something the U.S. is focusing on?
No, it is actually, and I actually just figured this out. There's part of the pipeline with the Green Berets to where you get your F-107, your pilot's drone or your drone pilot's license, and then they teach you how to make your own drones, and then they teach you how to utilize said drones and arm them for reconnaissance and also for munitions. And that's a whole pipeline now. Like, it's a whole MOS in the military. And so now, I'm thinking about when these guys get out and they're trying to find a fucking job. And they're like, all right, well, I'm really good at building and making drones.
They're all going to be on a list, probably.
I know. Well, I'm on a list too. Apparently, as soon as you go through cyber school, you immediately get
you have to
put
be
on
that
list,
which is cool. I'm on the list too.
Yeah, yeah. The government knows I exist. That's for sure.
Yeah, they keep tabs. It's interesting. I mean, you're in that industry, and like it's interesting to see the evolution of this, and specifically around some of these smaller. I mean, the evolution of this guerrilla warfare aspect of this, having the ability to not, you don't need a kid with a lot of cardio and training now that you can send off to fight this.
Yeah.
Now you can, now it just has to be a dude that has been training himself his whole life doing drifting maneuvers on his fucking PS controller
Yep.
or Xbox controller, and a lot of fucking dopamine in his brain or a stimulant in the form of tobacco or fucking nicotine and just sugar, and sit him down.
Yeah, probably just Adderall.
Yeah, or Adderall if you can get it. But I don't know. The I'm thinking about the operator. You mentioned this new form of pipeline where people are learning not only how to operate them but like build them and then augmenting their capabilities in this way. Automation is reaching special operations,
Yeah.
and I don't know. From your perspective, you think it's going to change special operations? Do you think their essence and who they are and their this grueling? I mean, I understand why you would put somebody through these grueling selection processes and training and stuff like that. You want to be very sure about that meat that you're going to be putting behind those millions of dollars worth of government equipment and also national security.
Yeah.
But is it changing though?
I don't think that it's going to change it. No, I think that you're going to have two different aspects or two different pipelines, right? The guys in 2nd Ranger Battalion, mainly probably even RRC, which is Ranger Reconnaissance Company. Those guys have been doing the whole drone program for quite a while. Same with the Green Berets, doing that whole drone program. But I think that drone operators as a whole are going to kind of be this, asset, like similar to a linguist or artillery. Artillerymen are notoriously, it's not a heavy pipeline. All you're doing is, throwing shells in this tube and then, pulling a cord. You don't have to be this physical specimen. But I think now when you combine that with somebody that can walk, 40 clicks in a night with all this gear, now to have the capabilities for drones, not only for reconnaissance, but also for actively, targeting and engaging enemies, that's one aspect. But you're still going to have your vanilla, video game kid, that got offered, a large signing bonus and salary. And, now they're taking it from Call of Duty to the real battlefield.
And it's been purposeful, I've heard. The way or method that you can drift on a controller is kind of like purposely built by some of these companies. I don't know. I've heard this. I don't know if it's true or not, but it transfers perfectly to drone operation.
Yeah. Just like, the kids had to find out the hard way. And I'm sure probably even in Ukraine that just because you can play a corner in a video game in Call of Duty doesn't mean that it transfers over to actual like CQC or ground combat or, urban operations. But with drones, nothing's different.
Yeah.
You're still fucking wearing goggles. And then also, they can maintain that level of operational, I guess, success because there's a certain level of desensitization when you're looking at a screen and you're not actually, face to face with the enemy. So I think you can milk them a lot more without having, detriments to their, their self.
Yeah.
They're not going to have this jaded, PTSD from war or for, stabbing a bunch of people. They just literally treat it like a video game.
I wanted to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of our Patreon members for their generous support. It's the only way we can bring some of these amazing people behind the microphone and have some of these amazing Midnight of the Soul conversations for you guys. If you're not already a part of the Patreon community, please consider joining us. We have our giant online training catalog for you guys to have access to, as well as some exclusive Sneak Reaper Industries merch drops for you guys at the Dead Drop tier. I would also like to thank the company Sneak Reaper Industries, one of our main supporters and a company that provides some of the most amazing urbanware, survival specific, and cutlery out there. Your support not only makes this show possible, but also supports some of the charities that we run, including the Fighter's Kitchen out of Puerto Escondido, where we're supporting some up-and-coming fighters under the tutelage of Eddie Farrell. Thank you for your support, and again, please consider joining us on the Patreon. And now back to the show.
The current climate right now on social media is pretty interesting. The division that the country's going through, the anger. In this industry, you're almost automatically, people almost automatically assume your politics because of who you were, what you did, and if you're in the industry, you're automatically tied to a side.
Yeah.
And, I'm an immigrant. I am new to this country and I'm still figuring things out. I first came to the U.S. During the, I see. I first came in. I first came into the U.S. During Trump's first election, and it's been an interesting time.
Yeah.
There is no place in the world that I think that I could have migrated to with the money in my pocket and now own a business and have like 12 employees the last time I counted, and I'm doing great, and we're doing great things. We're trying to put out the word about what's going on in Mexico, what's going on the border. We're doing advocacy. We're trying to inform people from the government, from the news agencies. Like I'm doing at least. I think I'm being a productive member of society,
Yeah.
right? But there is a division and hate out there that is just like undeniable, specifically now. There's a bunch of online influencers and people that have a similar background than you, or have a notion, or they want to think that they have a notion of what they're talking about. We just saw a very public assassination of a political commentator. I think that's
Yeah.
safe to say that was his title. Somebody that was going around the country and having these difficult conversations with people. He was a close friend of the current administration. He was somebody that was expressing conservative values and talking about things that would inflame some people. Public, your public persona, public identity in politics, man. How do you handle this?
For the longest time, especially when I was, running an apparel company and things like that, or even working for other companies as a creative or marketing director, I was always very apprehensive of stating political opinions. However, that's changed, and Afghanistan and the withdrawal of Afghanistan changed my opinion and my stance pretty largely. Due to the level of rage that I felt, after that abandonment. Granted, GWAT was over for, 4 different presidents. However, that level of withdrawal is directly tied to the Democrat Party, to include the fact that we're still funding the Taliban and paying them, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so now caveating that over into this current political climate, it fucking pisses me off. And I think one of the largest detriments to what's going on is the fact that the Republicans are normally passive and quiet. When something doesn't go our way, we don't light a fucking city on fire, unlike the Democrats do. And when Charlie Cook got killed, like when George Floyd died, who was a drug addict, kind of living on the streets, every city in the United States got lit on fire.
There was an organized effort across the country, and when I speak about that specific aspect of it, there's videos of me in some of these protests as an observer. I'm there like looking at what's going on. I mean, I'm new here. Like, let me go. Like, we were in Portland and I went to one of the protests and I got to see the organization. I got to see money being handed out. I got to see a lot of people speaking up about Black lives who aren't Black.
Yeah.
And some people who were of that color honking at them because they had to go to work and they were blocking the road.
Yeah.
So it was surreal. So it's a surreal environment. And also the ongoing process of vilifying law enforcement across the board, across the U.S., and just seeing standards drop in recruitment and seeing just empty police academies because of this.
Yeah, I mean, why would you want to be a cop in this day and age? Your hands are tied behind your back. It's celebrated when you're shot at. There was 5 police officers just in Pennsylvania last week that got killed. Well, 3 of them that I know of. And, now it's this celebration and, defunding the police. And I think it's part of, this integral plan to dissolve, the United States as a whole. I'm trying to figure out where that money is coming from, right? Because there was, pallets of bricks that were being dropped off in city streets, during those protests.
I got to see some of that. I got to see a box of like landscaping rocks
Yeah.
just dropped off somewhere, and just people just started
Where did that come from?
snacks, dropped off as well,
Yeah.
like boxes of like Red Bull and just granola bars for these people that are
In order
organized.
to sustain their protest.
Yeah, and then when I've been struggling with my politics for a while now here in the U.S. What I mean by that is I see a country very divided.
Yeah.
I like you see revelations now being made. It's hard to keep shit underground, or like it's hard to keep things suppressed as far as information. We live in an information age, but I think now we have too much information. There's a lot of fucking noise going on.
Yeah.
There are things that this administration has done that have been pretty controversial across the board. But there's other things that have been done that have, I think, many people, specifically on the conservative side, are celebrating that is happening. Securing the border, some of the stances that he's had as far as like wars, these forever wars around the world. But now we have this violent component to it, and as you say, from my perspective, being around some of this unfolding events in the country, again, completely out of my wheelhouse, but I'll comment on them because I have some experience seeing a country going under. You see, on one side, you see identity politics. You see marginalized groups in small parts of society wanting to dictate what all of us need to do.
Yeah, and there's no conversation to be had around that.
You have this celebration, this jubilation over somebody getting shot in the neck in a public way, from people that are, that probably have like hippie flags and tie-dye shirts at their houses, and violence was the last thing, I guess, that you would think would come from them. But here we are, right? You have this back and forth blame or of like who the killer was and what was his political stance. We see comedians getting their shows canceled. I mean, to me, it's Banana Republic, very similar to Mexico level shit.
Yeah.
Which I'm seeing, and it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
I thought I got away from this, but now I'm here. A few questions. With your background, when I saw the unfolding of this event, I saw a gunshot, a rifle shot, which that's what I identified it as from the sound and from the impact that I saw, because I've seen that before.
Right.
So I identified a rifle shot. I identified a lack of security protocols probably there. I don't know how many people he had with him that day, but I could probably safely assume that for his threat level, because I've worked with some high threat individuals like that, I'd probably have somebody of my own standing on top of that rooftop or maybe two people there. I immediately went online and looked at the place,
right,
and I saw that there was no fencing, there was nothing there. It's like an open space, people getting in and out of there. We saw somebody say it was them, get arrested, get freed. We had 2 instances like that during this event. The FBI did, in my opinion, a pretty bad job with social media during this time and this communication outwardly. I don't know, like, I'll ask your opinion on this a bit. And you saw people in the crowd jubilant about when it just happened, which is pretty, independently of if you agree or not on whatever he said. And if you were directly triggered or inflamed by some of the things we said, and he said some shit at some point during some of his public conversations that I'd be like, God damn, I don't agree with that. But yeah, nothing would warrant me like, hey, that guy needs to be. Then we start seeing these videos of the shooter running, walking towards the venue with a limp. And you're like, maybe he has a rifle down his pant leg, and part of it is concealed in his backpack. And that was in my mind that may be tracked. But then you saw videos of him coming off a roof that are suspect.
Yeah.
Then you saw a rifle abandoned that was also longer than what I imagined it would be. You saw a scope on it that seemed to be in a weird configuration. Maybe it was dropped. I don't know. You hear talk about him maybe taking the weapon apart. And I've taken something like that apart. You need at least 2 tools, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of.
A lot of things that doesn't make sense.
If it was me, I would have used maybe like a beach share bag or something like that to maybe move that around. But maybe I'm no, I don't know, right? With all that said, kind of like painting the picture, like what is your opinion on this event?
I'm typically not one to subscribe to like the tinfoil hat concepts and theories and stuff like that. And from the sound of the shot, it did unequivocally sound like a rifle shot. Now, the things that aren't adding up, though, is, I've shot somebody in the neck with a .308. And the neck is a relatively soft, organ and piece of tissue. And I would like to think that there would be a pretty excessive exit wound in the event that it was a rifle shot.
An explosive exit wound.
Yeah, very explosive, right? And however, when I first saw it, I knew that he was dead, right? Because, we see no dead guys, and it's the way that his hands locked up, which means that the neural pathways are no longer communicating from his brain to his hands. So I knew that there was no he ain't making it out of that. Now, the weird shit is seeing across social media, I've seen these hands and arm signals that people are, mildly worried about. And they're like, what is this shit? And then I saw one other angle. So there was another angle, if I'm Charlie, from, my 10 o'clock side of a camera that had a fast enough frame rate that actually saw this projectile coming and hitting him in the neck where he went like this. Yeah. And then what they did is somebody found this video on X of this guy coming up and doing this and kind of squeezing, like pulling his sleeve, but like squeezing his hand at the very same exact sound of the bullet going off.
Yeah.
And it looks like this weird undercover job. And one of the things that I've kind of figured out over the course of my career is truth is actually sometimes stranger than fiction. Tucker Carlson is coming out talking about this 9/11 report, 9/11 being an inside job. And there's a lot of things that doesn't check out 9/11. And so now going into this, now Candace Owens came out that Charlie Kirk was meeting with Israel in the Hamptons a week prior to this thing happening.
A few questions. There are conversations and people saying that he had body armor on. I don't see that. I could see his nipples through his t-shirt, so I don't see body armor on there. Although it would make sense for his threat level, maybe that he had something on, but I just don't see that. Do you think there was body armor on him?
No, I don't think he had it.
And also you mentioned the video of the trajectory, that high speed video of the trick. I've seen that too. So there's no way something would hit armor. You see a moment where his t-shirt puffs open like this, which makes sense with something going high velocity in.
Yeah, kinetic energy, and
You also see this moment where, if you've been in this realm, does it make sense to have somebody signaling a shooter far away and having them next to the person that you're?
No, and
what
this
context would that even?
This is the other thing too, and this is like what context, right? Unless there was somebody in the ground level that was, somewhat closed, that was actually going to be a trigger puller, right? Because the only other time that you would have to signal is if somebody's up on the stage and they're kind of, pacing back and forth, which in my opinion probably Charlie should have done. But he was sitting down in a chair, not moving an inch for the better part of an hour. So, it's not like you need to like time your round or, catch him when he's pausing like you would, a deer.
Yeah.
So, and then this kind of begs the next question is like, okay, let's subscribe to, this rooftop shooter. They're talking about having it be such a great shot and, it must be somebody that's well trained. But when you're on a 4-foot building and shooting at 200 yards, your angle of declination is greater than 30 degrees, which means you're going to have a difference in point of aim, point of impact of your bullet, right? And so because there's less gravity on the bullet, if you're up top and you're pointing down low, you're going to miss high. And so I would like to think that maybe he was going for center mass and then missed up here. It wasn't, no one tries to aim for the neck.
No.
And if he was going for a headshot, then he's not going to miss low.
It's T-box
or center
mass. It's
Yeah.
that's. I mean, if we talk about somebody sophisticated and trained,
right?
But also, if you're sophisticated and trained, you wouldn't shoot from the top of a roof on top of an empty building. You would probably shoot from the empty building,
right?
Yeah.
And then here's the other aspect of it too, is like he got the rifle up there, right? We know where was the rifle when we have this footage of him going up on top of the roof, right? And you could say, oh, it was broken down. It was a Remington 700 in a backpack. Depending on the Remington 700, it's probably a 24-inch barrel. And even if you did break that down, that's all the way from the back of the action all the way up to the front of the barrel. And I don't think that that's fitting in a fucking JanSport. And also, if you're going to take this shot and you're going to run and you're going to flee, why do you not have a getaway vehicle right behind the car where there's that one busy road? Why are you running through fucking bushes and backyards? And then also, why did you not just leave the gun up there if you're going to leave it under a tree anyways? Yeah. Right? So that part doesn't make sense. And then with the video of him jumping down, he was running in between streets and cars and trying to act all nonchalant, but I don't really see the bolt action rifle there.
Yeah.
And so, like,
it's a blurry video, and it seems like he has something in his hand, but I don't see the structure. It's like I don't know. Yeah,
it's just kind of like a longer black rag. Like, it might be, like a Mark 18 or, even an M4, but it wasn't technically.
So you have this assassination of somebody that was, and again, I don't know. This is like beyond my wheelhouse. I've also gone back and seen some of the previous videos and speeches and some of his commentary and how he had changed recently on his views on certain things. He was
like Israel.
He was pretty a big proponent of Israel in that way. And then he started to shift.
And then, with the information that Candace Owen released, she claims that they tried to pay Charlie Kirk, Israel, or Mossad $150 million in order to maintain support of Israel in, speaking and talking, right? Because a lot of the kids that Charlie Kirk was talking to are, very big proponents of, Palestine and Palestine, maintaining its freedom, even though Palestine barely exists anymore. It's just rubble. So he would have to answer these questions and have to have these opinions. And so if anything's going to go against, the Israel and Palestine war, Charlie had a large influence. I think that he had a large influence in Trump getting elected due to his conversations.
He definitely mobilized a lot of people in that conservative youth, or just people that started to question things. They started questioning things in universities. And again, I'm torn. My politics are torn. Because I understand a lot of both sides. Man, I'm an immigrant, man. I'm from a place where I'm from a place where a lot of the rights that I have in the U.S. are not there, like gun rights. I'm a big guy. I like having the ability to defend myself and my family. And I have a lot of people who are on the LGBT side, and friends of mine who are. That's their lifestyle, and I respect it, and I understand it, and I'll stand up for any of their rights if I can. But then I go to universities, and I'm kind of lectured on that by people. Like they try to lecture me on my beliefs on gun rights. I'm like, oh, guns are violent. Like, look at all the violence in your country. It's like, yeah, but you've never been a father of 3 daughters, and the cartels show up to your house, and like, we're going to take the prettiest one. We'll bring her back in a bit. Yeah. Would you want to be the guy without a gun in that conversation?
Right.
So it's complex, man. It's very complex.
It's super complex.
But I do see that there is a complete lack of a conservative voice kind of in most of universities, though.
Yeah.
That I do see in the humanities, specifically in social sciences. You can see that there's like a complete slant to one side of this conversation. And I think, in my experience, what I'm seeing in the U.S. is this extreme course correction on both sides.
Yeah.
It's either, hey, are you pro trans rights, for example? It's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to live your life in that way, cool. Okay, but we're going to have legislation around this, and you have to use these pronouns. And I'm like, dude, I barely know English.
Right.
Like I could speak pretty clear English because I went to language school, but I can't write it down.
Yeah.
And now I have to. So like, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, them participating in sports with my daughter,
Right.
like if she goes into a judo competition, and I mean that's where I'm like, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
There's ways. But you see this level of violence now. And we saw comedian Jimmy Kimmel basically say some things that were highly upsetting to a lot of people. And I sat through it and kind of listened to what he said. I think he was disingenuous in his commentary, saying that the right was basically looking to distance themselves from somebody who was clearly one of them.
Yeah.
But then we saw the censorship now going into the realm of like, hey, you can't, if you say something of this nature, like an attack on fucking freedom of expression, basically.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that? Censorship.
So I think I don't agree with censorship. I absolutely believe in free speech. However, right now we live in a world with multiple, online echo chambers. And part of one of the stances, and, I fully support LGBT rights, plenty of gay friends in the community. But if you want the same rights and you want the same treatment, why are you screaming from the rooftops or pulling triggers from the rooftops to try to obtain these things? I feel like right now in the United States of America, it's easier than ever to be trans or gay, easier than it's ever been. And I don't feel like there's an infringement on any of their rights or their free speech. I just think that they just want everybody to know that they are part of the LGBT community.
And that's like a trans. We're in Mexico. This is like a frontier for us here.
Yeah.
And trans people have always been a thing in Mexico, and gay people.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're closeted. There's still some of that going on, but they're pretty much in the open. We have comedians who are like trans, and it's like a funny thing. We're all laughing at some of the stuff they're going through. There's a group of them called Las Perdidas online on TikTok. You'll see them, and some of them engage in prostitution, and they make light of the fact that they are in this community. And people, there was a big reality show one of them won it, and we're fine with it in that way. But then it starts encroaching in the whole aspect that you say, like, hey, we are the biggest victims, and we're under attack. Like, they're threatening our way of life. I've never seen a more welcoming place to that lifestyle in the United States.
Right.
There's maybe Thailand, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, I was just, traveling through Europe for 30 days, and London, plenty of trans. Australia, back when I was in Sydney, plenty of trans. It's across the board. And I think that the only issue that we're running into right now is, when I was 8, I wanted to be fucking Spider-Man. But guess what? I'm not Spider-Man. And so I think that during these young developmental, years, that it should be about education and not, a forced, I guess, gender identifying sect.
I struggle because, like, I have kids, and what if one of my kids wants to go that route, or that's an option that is presented to one of my kids, and they're like, hey, this is an option for you. I mean, I wouldn't allow my 14-year-old to get breast implants.
Yeah. Just like they can't get a tattoo right now. Just like, they can't buy cigarettes.
So but I haven't seen that side of the argument on that side say, like, hey, you know what? That's actually correct. We should probably let them mature enough so they could be. Then they could turn themselves into a lizard if they want, like a tattoo, like a whole fucking lizard pattern on themselves. Like that's their right. You know? But it gets into this weird place on that end, and on the other end, we're seeing political censorship and freedom of speech targeted now in a weird way that I hadn't experienced that from that level.
Outside of COVID, no, I haven't seen it. But COVID was a massive one, political censorship. You know, companies are being blacklisted and shut down, and you know, who the fuck has made it to say that this information is true or not true? And now that it's coming out, and it was true.
I had my Instagram account at 500,000 taken down because of COVID posts.
Was that why you disappeared? I was wondering what happened to that account.
I posted a video of Chinese people, Chinese community somewhere where they were being welded into their houses.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That did it.
Wow.
Um,
and it's China. And last time I thought, you know, China was the enemy, but now, you know, God forbid we blame COVID on China.
Yeah.
Or even acknowledge, you know, what they're doing to their own people.
With people with your background in your community that have this, I don't know, this feeling of, the suicide rate after the exit from Afghanistan, and just kind of the disenchantment that a lot of these people are having now with politics in a lot of ways. Like people like us who are trying to be moderate, I guess, in the middle, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, like what do we do? Like
the problem is a bear has been poked, and Charlie Kirk being murdered on, you know, pretty much live and for the world to see, has poked a bear. And that bear is the conservative, you know, Christians that have been, you know, just having everything thrown in their face with regards to LGBT rights and the Democrat Party and so on and so forth. And so now, when you get an angry, you know, veteran that has a bunch of skill sets, and even potentially, you know, suicidal to a point, you know, I think that we're going to see a much larger kinetic environment in the United States in the coming years.
I mean, we're going from a Charlie Kirk that would go and engage in public discourse with people at universities to a Nick Fuentes who is talking about some wild shit online. And that's the loudest voice now that we're now hearing, you know. We have Charlie's best friend, you know, Candace, who is, at some point, she needs to be the director of the FBI at some point. If there's anybody.
With all the shit she's finding out.
I've been following this Macron's wife thing.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I'm hooked on it. I'm still on the, I don't know, man. I'm still on the fence. I don't know. Maybe she can come with some evidence about her not being a dude, but whatever. But you see her distancing herself from a whole segment of that political party because of her stance on certain things. And now she's openly talking about a conspiracy.
And she got kicked off the Daily Wire. You know, that's kind of where she got her start, and the Daily Wire kicked her off. And I think that part of this division, and especially with, you know, kind of the far left and then like this like moderate right and or far right leaning, is, and no knock to any of it, but I think that there is a certain level of you know, religious beliefs that is preventing any sustainable conversation with those on the far left. Because you know, I've read the Bible quite a few times, and I used to be a very devout Christian, and God doesn't really take too kindly to gays and trans people, and it's also not something that, you know, the far right Christians want, you know, in school in any capacity, because it's, you know, a sin, and you know, for the Christians. And
also, I've noticed that a lot of the evangelicals, and I grew up Catholic, and one thing I've realized in the United States is that's not enough. Catholicism is not enough. It's too demonic, or it's too corrupt. I don't know. They have this concept about Catholicism.
Yeah.
And I grew up in that culture. I grew up religious. I read the Bible, and it is something that brings me comfort. But I do consider that Jesus was pretty much anti-state. and
Yeah.
he was a table flipper, and he rolled around with a bunch of gangsters, and one of them carried a sword. And I have enough of a concept of what I'm reading in this book that I can tell that a lot of these people that are very evangelical are not acting in a very Christian way.
No, that's always been the case. That's part of the reason why I wanted to leave, the church, I guess, as a whole, or at least organized religion.
I'm on that boat.
Is due to that, and it's due to, they're the first ones that are, cheating on their wives or, living in an open marriage, but they're going to, their bebop $5 million church on Sunday and tithing and listening to a rock band and having some 25-year-old fucking pastor, preaching praise.
I mean, I've been in some of these mega churches myself. I've been invited a few times to some of them, and I just can't fathom.
I can't do it.
I can't. I don't understand. But again, my respects to these people. Like I get it, but it's just not. I don't understand. My main problem with organized religion, is specifically that in that realm. When my brother died, the church didn't want to send anybody to talk to my parents because they didn't marry through the church. And that ended that for me. And then my mom kind of went into the psychiatric thing after the loss of my brother, and then she went to Christians, and they robbed her for everything she had.
Yeah.
So that's my issue with that side of it. But another thing I've noticed is this whole aspect within the evangelical side of things, where they're tying the second coming of Jesus with our support for Israel, which I don't understand this. But I mean, I have friends who are Catholic who have been to the Holy Land and have been spit on by people out there, or have been targeted and not welcomed because of their spiritual beliefs. I'm not saying this about everybody there. I know there's different people there, and they have different ways of relating to Christians and Catholics that visit the Holy Land. I have many Israeli friends, and I support a lot of them in what they do. But I know that there's extremes to everything, just like there are here in the United States. There's like fucking sides, So I've always tried to figure out exactly what's going on. But I've noticed that there's like a direct attachment to the support of Israel.
Yeah. And I don't know why.
Because of this apocalyptic kind of notion that we need to
latch onto something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I saw it kind of called out publicly recently was Tucker Carlson, like actually talking to Ted Cruz, I think, where he was like Ted Cruz was stating that like he's religious because he's Christian, he supports Israel.
Right. Because it's not Islam.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a wild. I keep saying this over and over again, but it's a wild time to be a new American.
Yeah, and my wife is we met at Chacho actually just before COVID, and she's a Canadian, and we had to navigate all of the immigration issues. We had to stay down here in Mexico for months on end due to visa days and all that stuff. And Canada wouldn't let me go up there, and so then she stayed with me in the States. But had to go through the checks and balances in the process, and she doesn't have any, there wouldn't be any racial bias towards her. I also do think that a large part of the reason why we had a relatively successful, long drawn out and expensive but successful immigration process for her was because of who she's marrying and it being me.
Yeah.
And as soon as they do a background check, they know everything. So a guy with a top secret security clearance marrying a Canadian isn't really throwing up any red flags. But I got a question for you, kind of based around, when Trump first got elected, well, this last election, there was overwhelming support from the Mexican community.
Yeah.
In the States. And now with these ICE raids, do you think that that's changed?
It's gone.
Yeah.
I think it's you have this got you moment that a lot of the people on the left are now kind of pointing at those this Latin MAGA movement that happened. There's this whole viral videos of people from the Puerto Rican or the Cuban community supporting and singing for Trump, and now having their family members being deported. Some of them are being deported because they fucked up criminally.
Yeah.
And if you're going through that immigration process, you don't fucking drive drunk, you don't commit crimes, you don't do it, you try not to. That's because it's a fear, man. So you try to keep yourself on the fucking level. So you see this, you saw his momentum during the elections and this promise that he had. And you saw a lot of people who were disenfranchised by from the countries that they're leaving. You know, that's one thing that people sometimes don't get. Specifically second, third generation Mexican Americans who don't know why their grandparents left Mexico, or why their grandparents left whatever country in Latin America they left, you know. Like myself, man, I left because there was no choice, and there was like, I had to, you know. There is a sense of trying to find a new home and create a new future for your family. And a lot of the times that you try and do that, you become a traitor to your culture. Like I have a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, where like, hey, you're like a traitor because you went to the U.S., you know, or because you're doing this, you're talking about this. So there's a sense of that. But also there's a sense of responsibility with somebody like me who, I don't have clearances, you know.
Yeah.
I don't have schooling. I have experience. I know things. I have this ability to show people some things about my experience and kind of transfer that. And I've been moving about the society in that way and kind of and I've been productive, you know. But not a lot of people like, I had that luck, I guess. When you have people moving to the U.S., making a life for themselves, working, paying taxes, trying to make the best for their family and the future of their family.
Well, here's one of the things that you know as well is, you know, during the open border policies and during all this immigration where, you know, the borders are being flooded and all these people are coming in, a large majority of those individuals are not from Mexico. You know, they're from Venezuela and Guatemala and Honduras and that. And then the Mexican population that has gone through all the checks and balances in order to obtain a very difficult, you know, permanent residency status, coming from, you know, Catholic conservative, you know, valued homes in Mexico.
And working, the work thing.
Like, and that's why I'm trying to figure out why there's this massive level of animosity towards ICE, where because, you know, this free ride and a free border to work somewhere is not from their home country. They didn't go through the processes that these legal, you know, Latinos and Latinas are, you know, have done. I feel like that would almost add some level of animosity due to them essentially, like I said, cutting the line.
I guess what I've experienced on that end is we're all brown. And that is being targeted. Yeah. Like I've experienced that myself, you know, because of where I'm from and what I look like. And if I speak Spanish somewhere, you know, that get nervous. Yeah. You know, and we've seen a few Supreme Court rulings out recently where it's like a green light to profile. And that's one of the issues where I think that's turning. Yeah. Where whatever momentum the conservative side of this conversation had within the Latino community is going to be corroded or if not almost lacking for the next elections, which is I think we're
3 now, 3 left, 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, but there's I mean, what I see, you know, one, it's an enraging, like me speaking about this, I'm gonna get rained on probably. And again, I have no dude, I'm nobody to like change anything, you know. I just see I see, you know, the federal government and this massive push against immigration disrupting large parts of the industry in the country and not in a good way. I see the revelation of an addiction that we haven't really seen or talked about, which is an addiction to illegal labor in the United States. Yeah. It's an addiction. Yeah. And I also see a giant community of people that have a similar background than I do, not wanting to go out anymore, even if they don't have any issues, because it's a fear now. And I see, I think on mine, again, I see, I see some of those, I see some of these same ICE agents and border protection agents who are exactly like I am, who have the same background that I am, and some of them are sons of immigrants. Some of them are immigrants themselves. Yeah. Now being doxxed, targeted, and vilified in a way that is pretty kind of akin to the like a hunting of them. You know, some of these people are getting all their lives being put online because of where they work
Yeah.
and what they're doing. So it's like
Such a double-edged sword.
it's wild.
Yeah.
I understand border security. I don't understand the level that is being utilized as far as force against some of these people selling corn on the side of the street. I mean, and again, I'm nobody, you know, so I don't know. And I think that's what's going to lose that Latino vote, or that Latinx. Somebody tried to make me fucking say that term once. Fuck those people. But that immigrant or son of immigrants or family of immigrants vote, I think, is going to corrode there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us out there.
Yeah, and then that's a shit ton of the workforce as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think if anything, I would ask, something has to be done about the legal path to citizenship and migration.
That's the point I was going to get to.
And I don't mean make it easier, make it more organized, more efficient, maybe.
Just streamline it.
Streamlining it. There's ways, many ways. It is infuriatingly unfair to people that go through that process legally to see people that don't go through that process and getting a shit ton of benefits.
Yep.
That is infuriating.
Yeah.
It is infuriating to people like myself that have gone through this process and now have made themselves a living, a wage, figuring out jobs for other people. I'm generating jobs. I'm trying to figure out my way into this experiment that is the United States, and doing it with extreme precautions.
Yeah.
More so than most citizens, because I don't want to get into any issues, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically fear. And a lot of the people that are in the same process that I am, or in the same kind of place that I am, that's our baseline anxiety and fear. And I don't know how you correct that. Like not with the way things are right now. It's like just they're two extremes right now as far as action.
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's kind of, I mean, it's not simple, but at the end of the day, if you're somewhere illegally, every country will kick you out, or maybe not hunt, you know, to the level that is currently happening right now. But contrary to anything that I've really seen, I haven't seen people with a residency status or a work visa being removed from the United States. It's those that were living with their tia and working in the fields or working in the back of the restaurant or the kitchen or helping support that family. And at the end of the day, you just can't really be mad about them, skipping the process of immigration. However, to your point, it does need to be streamlined. It needs to be a lot easier because me having gone through the process with my wife, I don't know. We paid for an immigration attorney that helped hold our hand through, the hundreds and hundreds of documents. And if you're not English speaking, I have no idea how the fuck somebody would do that. I couldn't even do that, and I got a college degree.
I had somebody help me out a little bit, but me and my ex kind of did most of this ourselves.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
Fucking wild.
It's so tough.
Before ChatGPT.
Yeah, right.
I guess that's another aspect of this that people just don't understand too, because they're too insulated in the United States. You want to talk about horrible fucking immigration policies? Try and immigrate to Mexico.
Right. Or Australia.
Like it's hard all over the place, man.
Well, here's the thing too is, I was looking at, my wife was just curious and looked up what it would take for me to essentially become, a resident of Canada. And Canada has a notorious immigrant population. I mean, there were some places in Toronto that I've gone to where it looked like fucking downtown Kabul.
Yeah.
And, they all are getting free rides. They're getting government stipends and food stamps and all those things. But me as an American would have a much more difficult process ever trying to get into Canada than somebody from Afghanistan. And so I'm trying to figure, is that due to current political animosity, or is that just due, like, why? Like, do I not fit the bill because I make too much money?
You're not a victim enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what
at the end, that's
what I figured out.
And also, that's kind of been my experience as well in the U.S. Like, my process was difficult because I wasn't at risk enough, you
Right,
know, or I
right.
wasn't, you know, although I had all these written statements about me from people from all levels, um, and but I had people that were coming in from countries that couldn't even speak the language,
Yeah.
skipping right through.
Well, and you'll remember quite a few years ago, back when I lived down here, where that immigration group from down in Guatemala was marching their way all the way up north from, you know, down south. And they ended up, I think, taking over that baseball
Yeah, they
field that
were
was
right across, yeah, right
all those
across.
tents and all
Yeah,
those things. And I ended up, you know, kind of talking to some locals around here. And, you know, they were throwing tear gas at the fence and the border wall and all that stuff. And the cartel was getting pissed off because it was really disrupting their process of navigating and moving, you know, moving goods.
yeah.
And so then the cartel was just whacking these Guatemalans and leaving them out in the TJ River face down.
Two of their leadership basically went online and said, like, this is going to become the new Honduras. You guys need to be, you know, square up against us. We're gonna. There's no way you can take us on. Like two loud voices in that group. That same night, a group of cartel members showed up there. The cops disappeared, and that was the end of that.
Yep. And then guess what? They left. Here's another question I got for you, right? Is Trump, you know, labeled, you know, the cartel as, you know, internationally and domestic terrorists, and even, you know, threatening of putting U.S. boots on Mexican soil, specifically targeting, you know, cartel members. Me personally, having, you know, worked in guerrilla operations, especially in urban environments, I feel like, especially in Mexico, that would be a very, very difficult process of actively finding, you know, said individuals because of the levels of corruption and who's paid off, and then also, you know, the whistleblowers of, hey, you know, I heard that the U.S. is coming, or they're going to do a DA. And I asked one of my buddies that was he was over at SEAL Team 6, and he was, you know, on the Bin Laden raid and all that, and you know, we kind of had the whole Sicario story kind of reborn. I'm like, do you think that there's any feasibility behind that actually, you know, being allowed?
Uh, the United States and Mexico are tied in a way that is, it's never been as entwined.
Yeah,
Uh, it- the ability for the U.S. to mm, keep and keep its place in the world is probably going to be tied to manufacturing capabilities, and China's probably on the way out of
yeah,
that. And I think the United States probably eyeing Mexico for that. And there's Mexico is the next China,
yeah,
probably. We see vast amounts of U.S. Nationals living in Mexico now.
tons.
We just saw this giant protest in Mexico City over gentrification and wanting to kick out the gringos. So we're seeing this anti-gringo movement in Mexico going on, um, and we're tied. There is no other time in history when both countries have been tied so close together. And
Isn't that funny though that they're protesting this anti-gringo and racism thing, but meanwhile in the U.S. Mexicans are protesting, you know,
it is
the the Mexican like thing, and also we're seeing it in the UK. I mean, the UK is absolutely fed up and protesting, and you know they're flying around these crusader flags because they want essentially their nationalism and their country back. Because I think 1 in every 7 Brits is actually British. And the same number is actually in Canada as well, due to their level of immigrant population. But now you look at the crime rates that are skyrocketing, and that is a direct correlation with open borders.
assimilation is a word that is vilified a
Yeah,
lot. You know, why would you assimilate, Ed? Like, why would you? Like, don't you love your culture and your country? And I'm like, if you go somewhere as a tourist, you have to like kind of, you know, on my end, I'm like, when I went to the U.S. and people like, I get a lot of like weird comments online that they think I'm not even Mexican because of the way I speak.
yeah,
Like, I went to language school. I'm trying to
yeah,
be better at communicating. How can I stand here or communicate to audiences with having an accent like this and having people just zone out because I start speaking like this? Like, they would freak out.
yeah,
So I had to fucking come up with this fucking way of speaking,
yeah,
right? Um, and also, like, I don't know. I've probably seen more of the U.S. than 90% of Americans. I think Iowa is Iowa, Alaska, and Hawaii is missing, but I've been everywhere else.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that the United States is many countries in one. But one thing I'm kind of certain about is there is no other place on the planet right now where you can figure out your life and the American dream, as they call it. It is like a real thing. And people doubt that. Dude, look at me.
Yeah.
You know, I have no fucking clue how I did it, but I'm in a pretty good place.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it better. You know, I'm trying to work for it. But there's this vilification of, hey, what does even being an American mean? Right? That's a very profound question that I got recently as an attack, you know? Where we're coming off a post 9/11 generation where we've realized that a lot of the stuff that we've been told has been manipulated, where a lot of the foreign policy that the United States has been doing or engaging in all the way back to, you know, some of the stuff that went on in South America and regime changing and stuff like that. A lot of that has produced some pretty bad situations for a lot of countries out there who are now holding this generational animosity against the United States.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I answered what America is, or the U.S. is to me right now. It is a place of experimentation. It is a place where ideas get fucking put on trial. Like, let's figure this. Let's figure out if fucking gender neutral pronouns and all these things could be a thing.
Yeah.
What other place on the planet could that happen in? It's the U.S. It's no other place. Whatever that space is for experimentation and trying to figure things out and being at the forefront of whatever humanity is as a culture. I think that's what the U.S., at least for me, that's the only place in the world where you can kind of figure some of those things out. But it's going away. And I think it's going away because of those two extremes, kind of like really being present and divided.
Yeah.
That's at least that's been kind of like my experience. Nick, it was a pretty cool conversation, long time coming. I kind of want to, again, like I've been asking a few of our guests to kind of come back maybe.
Yeah.
Specifically around conversations around some of the stuff that's happening, you know, because like this event this political killing that just happened, I think has a lot of people questioning, asking questions and just wanting to like conversations around it. And some of these conversations are being had by people that really don't know their shit. And I think you're pretty well versed in some of this stuff to kind of give us some of your points on this. And the fact that you have questions, I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah. I, having worked in the capacities that I did for a long time, like you said, and, you know, truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And I wouldn't put anything past, ideals or money.
Yeah. And we just found a giant cell phone network in New York. And we're still trying to figure out who's. So like all this Jason Bourne shit is probably coming true, which is scary too, man. I have kids, man.
Yeah.
The future is scary.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, Nick.
Of course, man. Appreciate it.